All right, hello and welcome to the Stampscapes Stamp Along. I haven't done one of these videos in a while, but I thought it was time after I did this scene. It's a very simple scene, but I think it looks fairly complex and involved, but in actuality, it's really easy to put together. And I thought I could do this one pretty fast. And if you'd like to do this with me, I think that'd be great. Okay, so if you want to watch the other video where I talk about theory, color theory, and all that, that's out there. But this one's going to be very straightforward in terms of just working on the process right here. Okay, so this is the card we'll be doing, and it has two components right here. It has this photograph up top and some cardstock down below. Okay, now my photo print is 4 by 6 inches. Okay, now I have a whole album on my Flickr gallery, and I'll have a link to the photos that I use on these types of scenes. These two are different from one another. I thought I'd just actually that one looks the same there, doesn't it? The colors look a little bit different. But I'll put a link to this where you can download and print it out. Now, if you don't have a color printer, I had mine done at Costco. I just had several of the different prints made. I had them made in, I don't know, triplicate or 5 of each or something like that. It was very inexpensive, and I've had that pack sitting around for years that I can dip into. 4 by 6 glossy, okay? And then we have a 4 by 6 inch piece of matte cardstock right here. Actually, this one's a semi-gloss. You can use a matte though, okay? And then we have a 6 inch by 8 inch piece just to format this card into, like so, okay? These two pieces will go like that, and you'll tape them down or use your glue runner or whatever you use to adhere your pieces to your card, okay? All right. That is our surface our surfaces that we'll be using. What you'll use to make your impressions, just your standard dye-based ink. You can also use like a StazOn, an archival ink as well, okay? Something like this would be fine, or you can use both, depending on what you're stamping on. I'm using my Palm Island right here, 120F, looks like that. Here's some leaves for our foreground, down below like so. We have our baby sea turtles, large, okay? And then the structure for our lower piece is going to be the Seaside Cove Small 308G. You can also use the larger one if you have it. You would just use a smaller portion of it, or you would just have less sand area down here for your turtles, okay? But it can be used. All right. I have some gulls up here in the sky. A quote stamp. I think that quote goes really well with these turtles, but you can stamp whatever you want up there. If you're sending out a birthday card or something like that, happy birthday, or, happy anniversary, or, you know what I mean? Just something. Nature is malleable. You can use these cards for just about any occasion, okay? It could be a baby shower, I mean, having little turtles like that I think would be really cute. Okay, so that being said, let's get on with it here. We can stamp whatever component first. We can do our sky first or the lower section first. I'm going to suggest, though, now you can, of course, pause your video, but I'm just going to be doing this right here. I'm going to stamp this lower portion down here and allow that to dry just a touch. So while this is drying, I'll be working on this upper portion right here. All right. Seaside Cove Small. Let's get this inked up. And this is going to represent the horizon, okay? So you want this stamping off the top of this card, or get it as close to the edge as you can, okay? Go a little bit more though, because if I try to just line this up exactly edge to edge of this, I stamp it a little bit lower than I have this white line up there, which we can fill in with some colored pencil, but I just assume not have to fill in anything. So I'm going to go a little bit above, maybe 1/8 of an inch over the top of my card, okay? I wouldn't, don't go a 1/2 inch or something like that. Although if you have the Seaside Cove, the larger version, you can go way above. All right. If you haven't worked with large, stamps allow a surface area. I'm stamping left, center, right like this. And you can do the same thing if you were using a stamping platform. You bring your lid down here, stamp a little out there, here, and here, rather than just kind of going overall, and then sometimes the center doesn't stamp out because you didn't use enough center pressuring like that. I like to use acrylic blocks, and I have a lot of cushioning underneath there. You can use a magazine, or if anyone gets newspapers anymore, you can use something like that. Sometimes you save your ads or something of that sort. Okay, so we have our Seaside Cove, and you can see it's going right off the edge of that paper right there. All right, pause if you need to, or wherever you need to. All right, now this is one of the few places where we'll use colored ink. All right, if you have it. Brown tones, you have some distress inks, any brand that you want, okay? And what we're going to do is we'll take a couple different values of brown. You know, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the distress inks have a lot of those brownish tones, like, antique linen, there's walnut stain, old paper, those types of ones are great. If you have memento, things like desert sand, rich cocoa, something of that sort, okay? Now, I'll use a walnut stain. I know a lot of you don't have some Marvy ones, so I won't use those. Although you could, this will be roughly the same type of thing. Why don't I use a memento, desert sand, a distress walnut stain, and a rich cocoa right here, okay? Now, what you're going to do is you're going to grab, did I mention the tiny rock small? I don't know if I mentioned that, but that is what's going to give us this kind of this textured surface down here, okay? Now, if you don't have this one, you can use, another type of rock if you have it. Or you can just go for just smooth sand down here, and you'll be doing that with some of your colored pencils, okay? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this. Actually, okay, I was going to go with this right here. Let's just work on this lower section right here. I think that image is dry right there. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. Here's the technique using your little textural stamp, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to go in with our lightest tone like this, and you're going to stamp the dickens out of this, you know? Try not to stamp it up in the waves. Okay, now this is using a very light color right here. This is desert sand. If you're using like a distress ink and it's an antique linen, it's going to be very, very light in value, okay? You're gonna be sitting there, wait, I can't see anything. It doesn't look like his scene at all. Well, that's because I use all these colors, okay? And we work through kind of a value scheme. Okay, now see what I'm doing? Starting out on the outside, darker, lighter, lighter, lightest, like that. And what this scene looks like is it's lighter in the middle right here where it's like a little spotlit area. You know, these turtles are in the spotlight right here. It's lit right in here. It's because we're going like this, and you're working from the outside edge in like this, okay? It's very easy to do. You know, start out, now don't start off with a, a super dark brown if you don't have to, okay? That makes it a little bit more precarious because it's really dark, you know what I mean? By the time you get in here, it might be still fairly dark. So you start off with these lighter tones like this, and it is completely user-friendly in this thing. I guess my rocks are a little bit what I just stamped up here, and I dragged out a little bit of that black into here. If it does that, don't worry about it at all. If you get some of this sand stamped in there, oh my God, don't worry about it, okay? It's not going to matter because we're still going to color this whole bottom section, all right? So don't worry about that. And if you get a darker impression of this pebble in here, with these lightest of colors or whatever color we happen to be using, don't sweat it, okay? So you probably haven't used a stamp like this before, like an image. You're never taking an image. You're making an impression with it and lifting, and that's it. But this is more like, we're kind of doing this in the spirit of like a textural ink blender or something of that sort. Think about it like that, except it's just textured, okay? Now, I don't always use this stamp like this, but in this case where we have this large amount of area down here, and I don't want it to necessarily read as rocks. that's when you can use it this way, okay? Now here's what you're going to do. We have that pretty good, you know, some pretty good coverage in here now. Now what I want you to do is just make the edges a little bit darker. So instead of going out to in like this, out to in, what you're going to do is you're just going to build up some of this tone over here. So it doesn't read so much as texture. Well, it still does, but it's reading just more as tone because you're filling in over there, okay? And this is, again, where you start to use it as a, you know, it's like a textural tool, a textural, you know, ink, you know, applicator, blending tool, whatever you want to call it. All right, that is it for the desert sand right here. Move to your next incrementally darker tone. Now, if you can't tell, stamp it out on a scratch piece of paper or something like this. But this walnut stain is going to be a little bit darker than my previous color. Same technique, okay? Now, one of the things you might notice here, see, I'm kind of working an area. I'm not going like this, okay? I'm just staying here and working it outside to inside, okay? So I'm going a little bit more like this. In this lower section, I come a little bit farther over there. Okay, like about like so. And that's it right there, okay? We'll start it right here. I'm turning the card in a direction that's going to be most conducive for my application of this. Maybe even go like, I'm right-handed, so maybe I'll flip this upside down and I'll go like this. Okay, this is a lot of repetitive movement, so just turn it in a direction that is the most conducive for a comfortable application of whatever you're doing, especially when you're doing something like this, you know, with a repetitive type of motion. Don't hold your stamp with a, you know, an iron grip or anything like that. This is just very light and airy like this, not developing any pressure in my wrists or anything like that. Okay. Nice and ergonomic, okay? All right, that is the walnut stain. Kind of a medium brown. Like I said, mix and match your colors. You know, to say, oh, I got to get that rich cocoa. I have this other brown, but I got to use the one that, you know, Kevin's using. I don't even use the ones that I'm using, okay? If I did this again, I might forget what I used on my... I don't remember what I used on this one. You know, it was probably Marvy's or something like that. I just grabbed whatever I had, okay? But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of us have, you know, a couple different tones of brown, right? Or at least one. If you have just one, you know, on this piece right here, I don't know, think about getting another one for the future, but just get your darker tones using your colored pencils that we're beginning to. All right? All right, so that's the most amount of kind of, you know, I wouldn't say that's a hard technique right there, but easy enough. It's just repetitive, all right? So we have our darker tones like that, going on the inside like that, lighter in the middle. Now, I could have stamped those turtles in there to begin with, which you could have done. Sometimes I like to kind of leave it as is and see, you know, how the lighting is, and that can determine kind of my placement of my turtles, okay? Sometimes it gets too dark and it's like, okay, I'm going to stamp the turtles in the lighter area, you know? Whatever you want to do. Here come the turtles right here. All right. We'll stamp them on down. I don't put them up in the waves or anything like that. Have them kind of lower than the waves, okay? Stamp them out like so. Okay. There we go, like that. We got our cute little turtles moving out to sea. And let's see here. Okay, now I have my leaves stamp. All right, I need my whatever size block this is for this one now. This is the leaves. And I'm going to go for a couple different tones of green, or not green, but I'll go with a green and black, okay? When you do that, it just kind of creates a little bit more depth in here than just going with one color. We can just only use black too, you know, and that creates a lot of kind of contrasting distance in between us and the objects. I have a real dark green right here. It's called bottle green. use what you have. I don't know if I'd go with something too light though, because we have this area down here that's already fairly dark. All right. Now this is just something I'm just watching that I'm not stamping over the top of, my turtles. If it goes over one, no big deal. Yeah, I don't want it to stamp over a bunch of them, okay? So see this right here? And I'm not stamping out my whole leaf stamp, okay? It's just, now here, I'm barely using even a third of it, okay? See that right there? And then I turn it around, okay? So the leaves are kind of going like that way. I just don't want the branch, the stem, like that coming in that way. But it's made to stamp in multiple ways, okay? So go up here, and we'll come over it, maybe over here like so. Okay, now watch this. We're going to create a little bit of depth with this, okay? I'll take my black pad now, ink up, and we'll go a little bit outer, more perimeter oriented, okay, with these impressions. So you have the lighter one in here and the darker impressions over here, just like our pebbles, lighter impressions in here, darker ones out there, okay? I'm not inking up my whole stamp, but, ink up a little bit more than you think you'll need, because when you start to make your impression, you want to know that you've inked up enough of it. So hopefully you can see a little bit of variation in those leaf impressions. Some are black and some are a fairly dark green, okay? So what we're doing is we're creating a little bit of a depth within the foreground, where we're creating near and far in the foreground imagery. Okay, so see this right here? I'm just using a little tip of it, like right there. Right there. Right there. Okay, now that's all we need to do for this. This is going to dry for me right now, okay? And let's start addressing our top portion. And then this lower area down here, we'll hit it with the colored pencils, coming back to that, okay? All right, so we have our Palm Island stamped on the left and right. We have our flock up here and our quote stamp. Now, on these photos that I have this fairly empty area right here for the quote. Like I wouldn't put a quote over here, a word stamp, unless it was really bold, because, you probably wouldn't be able to read some of the lettering in this darker area as much as through the light. So you want kind of an open space like that if you're going to be doing a quote stamp. Like I said, you can fit it in there or you can mount it over the top of this if it's not stamped directly on top of this. But let's go with the Palm Island first here. Okay, on your photographs, photo prints, you can stamp with like a StazOn. I'm going to just use my dye-based ink. Okay. Now, like I said, ink up more than you think you're going to be needing. I stamp the left side of it and then the right side of it, okay? So when I flip this over, I'm using this left side, okay? And then I'll ink up the right side and do it over here. Don't go with the same impression, okay? Because if you stamp it out here, then go over here without re-inking. A lot of those trees are going to stamp out very light, okay? All right, so this area right here, I'm going to try to go below this line. I'm not going to try to match it up exactly. I want to go a little bit below it, okay? Or, a decent amount. And let's go. Now, don't close it off. We want those turtles to be able to make it out to sea. Okay, so leave a little bit of an opening between your impressions, okay? All right, so that is right there. And then this one, I'll stamp right over here, okay? My impression right there came out a little bit light. I didn't hold this down. I guess I was rushing. Let's hold this down a little bit longer, okay? Now this is an emulsion coating, and emulsion coating coated photo paper, it's made to accept water-based media, okay? Like inkjet inks. which I didn't know were water-based until recently. It accepts them fairly quickly, but do allow that ink to transfer over. The thicker your inks, the slower the transfer, okay? But it's just holding it down. It's not holding it down for an extra minute or something like that. It's, for a few seconds. So you can see my print right there is a little bit darker than this one. I think that looks fine, though. This one looks like maybe that's a little area or an island that's a little bit farther away because it's lighter in tone. Okay, so here's a little tip right here in terms of pressure. This is a very small stamp, right? So you don't want to squash it like this, although that print came out okay. Let me see. I'll squash it like that. Okay, so it looks a little bit blurry. You just want to go for a light, even pressure on this, okay? Like I said, someday after we stamped out our Seaside Cove, this or something like that, we're making pressure like this, and standing up and, using leverage and everything like that. Well, we don't need that anymore with such a small stamp. So just light, even pressure. Okay. And we have our nice little, I think those birds look really three-dimensional on top of that. Okay, our word stamp. Hopefully I get this nice and straight. Sometimes, I stamp these things out and they're a little bit skewed. Actually, I have it a little bit mounted on my acrylic block, a little bit crooked. Sometimes I use a little bit, the wrong pressure too, and a couple words, get, kind of squashed. You can do, I do a little practice, a couple practice impressions first, okay? Just because word stamps, you really want them to, those letter forms should all be fairly, balanced and equal in terms of, legibility. Okay. If you, get a little bit off or something like that, don't worry about that. Okay. Sometimes if I don't know, get something really bad with my quotes, I just stamp it on a different piece of paper, cut it out, and I use it to put right over the top of it, like a little framed quote area. But that's all that is with this whole composition right here. Let's give you the gist of what this is going to look like right here. Okay. So this card is just about done. What do we have to do? We just have to color in this area right in here. Okay. And you've all done a lot of coloring, but I'll give you a couple tips on what will make this area really kind of stand out a little bit more. Okay, but the first thing would be lighting. Okay, now you notice how I've left some of these areas in here a little bit lighter? It shows on the stamp, okay? The center, can you tell, is lighter? And then you can see those waves are a little bit lighter. So we're following that general lighting scheme in here. Okay, so you don't need to reinvent anything. So what you need to do is grab a range of blue tones. Now I just have a Prismacolor set, of, I don't know, what is it? 48 colors. And this is roughly going from light to dark like that, okay? And then we have our, little sandy tones right here. Here's a little bit of a beige, here's a brown, a little bit darker brown, a little bit of a gray brown right here. That looks black on my screen here, but this one's a sepia, okay? You don't have to use 4 or anything like that. If you just have 2 of each color, light and dark, that'll be fine, okay? Don't sweat it. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. Here, let me put these ones out so you can see. What you're going to do is you're just going to grab whatever lightest tone you have, and you start coloring in your wave areas. Where is it lighter? It's lighter right in here. And you can see these light areas on my waves. So I'm going to come into the areas that are a little bit darker, like underneath my waves. But remember, this is the lightest color, so you're going to get a pretty good coverage with this too, okay? You can color in some of these rocks too if you want to. Now don't be so kind of, careful that, oh my God, I got a little bit of blue over the top of that lighter area. It's not like that at all, okay? You don't have to be like super, careful about your placement. Just what this is kind of getting at is just don't color in everything completely uniformly, which some people do, okay? But when you do that, you're kind of eradicating this idea of lighting in your piece. So in reality, in order to create lighting while coloring, you're really doing less work because you're just not coloring as much, okay? So let's say if I have a boat or something like that that I wanted out here, then, you know, I probably want to have that area around the boat a little bit lighter so it looks like it's kind of like a stage or something like that, where you're staging your objects and you're putting whatever you want your viewer to look at in the spotlight, just like these turtles down here, okay? Now here's my little trick right here. I'm going to put a little of this blue in my sandy area. That's where I'm going to be putting some of those, you know, tan colors, the brown colors in those areas, but I'll put a little bit of blue down there just to create a little bit more continuity between that ocean, you know, the blue ocean water, and land, okay? Notice how, see, this is the natural motion of my hand, but notice how I'm not coloring like this. I'm switching it like this, so I can do this right here. And then see if I want to come over here. Well, I gotta need to be careful that some of that ink might be still a little bit wet. Okay, so we'll come in like this. If you stamp at your seaside cove and it's like, oh my God, I missed this whole area in here. You know, you can kind of just fill it in with tone, you know, if there's a little spot in there. Okay, now I've gone with my lightest color. Let's go in with this one right here. Here's a little bit of a warm blue. This one's an aquamarine, okay? A little bit of a jeweled tone. It's almost like the, what is it? The semi-precious stone turquoise. You know, that's what that color looks like to me. And where are we putting this? We're putting it roughly over the same places that we placed our previous color, okay? This is just kind of making it a little bit richer looking, okay? And see, I'm going over some of these waves. It's okay. But some of these lighter ones I'm kind of leaving as is, but let's get a little bit of color into that just so it doesn't look so uniformly white, okay? What am I doing? I'm doing kind of a little bit more of a sloppier application of color than you're probably used to doing. You're probably used to being very careful about not breaking out of your lines or designated areas for a certain color. But I am on this one just so I can get a little bit of that blend going. See that blue that's coming in here? And I put a little bit of blue down here too. All right, now this is starting to move into a little bit of darker tones, so I'm going to hit this in some of my darker areas. Well, where are some of those darker areas? You can see it right on the waves. Some of those areas are a little bit darker, like underneath the lip of the wave, okay? And you can also make it where it's a little bit darker on the perimeters like this, just like we did with our Tiny Rock Small, okay? See this right here? With this darkest of color, I'm kind of going a little bit more perimeter oriented with it, okay? Just like that, okay? So it's a little bit lighter in there and darker out here. Darker out here, lighter right here. Okay, here's a real dark one, blue violet. These aren't planned colors. I just eyeballed it and grabbed, it's like I'm grabbing some blues and grabbing a range of it. Okay, there's some other blues in the kit too, but I figured 4 would be enough here. You can do it with 3. I think it even looks good just as is without this 4th one. If you want to go a little bit darker too with any of the colors, of course, just press harder. Okay, or just go with more layers of whatever color you happen to be working with. Okay. All right, so I would say that is it. Now, if your imagery right here is nice and dry, then we can start coloring in this. We almost don't need to color in too much, okay? But outside to inside application of color, I'm going right over the top of my leaves right here. This is not, colored pencils aren't opaque. They're more transparent to translucent, so I'm going over some of these turtles, and it's not as if sand, that's what the color of this is. is showing like it's over the top of anything, okay? The darker things always look like they're a little bit closer. Okay, let's go like this. Let's bring some of this sand on this perimeter of this. Now, if you're using the Seaside Cove large, then maybe you don't have it unless you use the left or right side of it. But let's use some of this on the perimeter right here. And let's bring a little bit of warmth into our ocean, okay? See that? I don't know if you can tell, there's a little tinge of warmth up there. Remember, we brought some of the blue down, and then we'll bring some of the browns up like that, okay? And again, it just makes it easy, you know. I mean, you don't have to be super careful about your color placements. Everything's kind of harmonizing together, okay? Here's brown that I'm on now. Sienna brown, that's what it's called. And I'm mostly focusing with this in the darker areas around the perimeter. Okay, that's enough of that. Sepia. All right, kind of hit it around in the corners like so. I won't go too much darker with this. But that is that, okay? Let's take a look at this and see how it looks in context, okay? What I mean in context is just paired with its, I don't know, kind of sibling element right there. And there you have this piece right here. Someone was asking me how long this took to do, or my previous one, okay? And I said it took about an hour, okay? But, you know, now that I know how to do it, it would probably take about 30 minutes. And right now we're at the 31:43 point. So, you know, like 30 minutes, half an hour to do this really dynamic card, okay? Now on this one right here, I used a little bit of white pigment ink on there. You know, I don't want to take, you know, too much longer on this one because the whole idea is, you know, just to make it fast. But if you have a white paint pen like this, down in these little splashy areas right in here, I can have a few little splashes like this, or if you have a white gel pen like that, put a little bit of extra little splashes out here on the splashing, crashing ways, where I do have little dots in the design itself. So I'm just going back in and adding some more in there like this, okay? Kind of makes it a little bit more shimmery and reflective, or if someone receives this card, they can kind of see the little details that you put down. You can put little sparkly dots on your sand down here. You know, the sand is probably wet and it's very glistening, you know, with the light hitting it, okay? If you want to, you can put a few little highlights on your leaves, or if you have like a green paint pen or something like that, put some little highlights in there. Let me just do that right now, not to complicate things like that, but I didn't do it on my previous one, but let's try this little green. You got to shake these up pretty good, you know, just to get them not flowing, but mixed up. Otherwise, they're very separate and real watery. That's good, though, because these pens, from my experience, do not clog. These are the Artistro ones, okay? But let me see what this will look like with a few little kind of, you know, warm green highlights on some of these tree branches here. I think that looks pretty good. It just makes them look a little bit more dimensional and kind of sparkly and fun. Okay, so all you have to do now is just take your whatever kind of, you know, tape or whatever you're using, like so, and tape this top one down, or tape the, I would probably tape the bottom one down first, okay? And then what you do is you know, apply your tape on the back side of this one. Make sure that, you know, everything's dry, and this should be well dry by now. And then what you do is you take this and then slide it down like that and butt them up right against one another. Try to get it as centered as possible, and then tape it down like that. Okay, now sometimes, you know, you're off by 1/16 of an inch. I'm all the time, okay? So what I do on my final piece, if that's the case, is I just take my paper trimmer. Sometimes I'll need to you know, cut off up there, down here. But see, as you can see a little bit of my white border like that. It's like a 32nd of an inch. If you want to clean that up, take your paper trimmer and just trim this down like that and just take off a little bit of space like this. What do you do on the outside of your cards? You do your greeting or something like that, you know, happy birthday to whoever, you know what I mean? I would spruce this up, of course, you know, but I did this on a piece of white paper. I think something that would match this paper better, you know, is to make this one like a baby blue cardstock or something like that. Something, you know, so that the outside kind of matches the inside a little bit more, you know. It looks like blue skies or something like that. Or you can stamp some clouds up here. I think that would be really great. You know, with a word, you know, your word stamp or your happy birthday, your greeting or something of that sort. And then, you know, when they open it up, voila, you know what I mean? It's just, it's almost like opening like a gift, you know, when you have this like this right here. It's like a surprise too. And I think it hits people with kind of more, it's almost like, it's like a pop-up card, you know, is what we're doing, but we just made it out of a couple two-dimensional pieces like this, and we're taking advantage of the folded card aspect of this to create a pop-up type of look. And I think this looks very three-dimensional. I mean, it is, being that, you know, we're looking at it at an angle like that. But, you know, I do think that that goes back in depth a lot. You know, and this right here is going back in space. More than the distance of this actual 4-inch space right there. I think it looks really dimensional and really fun. So anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this stamp along with me. I really love this card and this kind of formatting. I plan to explore it further, but just to show you that these cards can be developed really quickly like this. And, you know, I think for a really big visual payoff for the amount of kind of time and expenditure that went into it, especially. So, you know, even this took an hour, I think it's, you know, well worth the time or something like that. But when you can do something like this in a half an hour, I think that's pretty good. I don't know if I'm doing 20 of these, you know, to give away for whatever, you know, Christmas, you know, tropical Christmas or something like that. But I don't know. You can probably come up with something similar in the spirit of this type of card right here, and very quickly. All right, thanks again. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comments section. And if you like these videos, hope you hit the like and subscribe.